In the heart of New York City, one woman inherited a dream and stepped into a nightmare. What looked like a blessing quickly became a battle against power, corruption, and silence. This is the story of how she stood up and how the city stood with her. The inheritance? My name is Lena Brooks, and I never thought I'd end up living in a 1930s-era co-op in the heart of Manhattan's Upper West Side. I inherited the place from my Aunt Ruth, a retired music teacher who had lived there for nearly 4 decades. When she passed away, I became the legal owner of apartment 3G at the elegant yet crumbling building known as the Westford. I was 34, a freelance journalist barely scraping by in Brooklyn. Suddenly, owning an apartment in one of the city's most historic neighborhoods felt like winning the lottery. But as I would come to learn, that lottery win came with strings attached, strings pulled by the most powerful HOA board I had ever encountered. The Westford was stunning in a dusty old New York sort of way. The lobby had original Art Deco tiling, a tarnished brass elevator, and a doorman who looked like he'd been there since World War II. But beneath the charm was a network of rules, restrictions, and a board that governed more like a mafia than a management committee. At first I was charmed. The neighbors were polite, if distant. The superintendent, Frank, warned me gently, "Don't let the board see you bringing in too many guests or packages. They'll fine you." I thought he was joking. He wasn't. It started small. A $25 fine for leaving my bike in the hallway for 10 minutes. Then $50 for a single potted plant on my kitchen windowsill. And then, absurdly, a $75 notice for excessive elevator usage. The board's grip. The board of the Westford was made up of 5 long-time residents, led by a woman named Dolores Keene. Dolores was in her late 60s, always dressed like she was on her way to a charity gala, and had a voice like crushed velvet over broken glass. She summoned me to a courtesy meeting in the boardroom 2 weeks after I moved in. "Miss Brooks," she said, offering no handshake, "the building thrives on order. We expect you to honor the traditions we've maintained for over 80 years. Traditions? Like policing potted plants?" They handed me a 36-page handbook. I skimmed it later that night. No guests after 10 p.m. without prior approval. No overnight guests without a week's notice. No music above 45 decibels. All renovations must be approved down to the paint color. I laughed, then I cried. Then I called my lawyer. "It's a co-op, Lena," he said. "They can set crazy rules. Unless it violates city law, you're stuck." I didn't want to be stuck. I wanted to fight. Whispers in the walls. One morning, while checking my mail, I met Mrs. Fuentes, an elderly woman from the 4th floor. She looked nervous, glancing around before whispering, "You shouldn't cross Dolores." "She's just the board president," I said. "No, she owns this building. Not on paper, but in power." That week, Mrs. Fuentes received a violation notice. Unregistered nurse visiting for more than 3 hours. The building had a camera system monitored by the board. They watched every resident like prison guards. I started noticing patterns. Elderly residents who had lived here for decades were quietly selling and moving out. Apartments were being renovated overnight and relisted by a real estate group called Sinclair Holdings. I dug deeper. Sinclair Holdings had purchased 11 of the building's 45 units in the last 5 years. Dolores's cousin was on their board. The HOA was approving internal sales, denying external ones, and applying pressure to non-compliant owners. This wasn't governance. It was gentrification by stealth. The meeting that changed everything. I decided to attend the next monthly board meeting. It was open to residents, though rarely did anyone show up. That night, only 2 other residents joined me. Dolores and the other board members sat at a long mahogany table, sipping wine. I raised my hand. Why is Sinclair Holdings being granted so many internal sales? Dolores didn't flinch. That's not your concern, Ms. Brooks. Another board member, Victor, chimed in. The board reserves the right to ensure buyers align with the building's culture. What culture? Fear? They voted unanimously to adjourn. But I had made myself known. 2 days later, I received an eviction notice. The board claimed I had violated multiple occupancy rules and created a hostile environment. Retaliation. The eviction notice was a bluff. Legally, they couldn't remove me without a court order, but it rattled me. Then came the mail tampering. My packages disappeared. My guests were turned away by the doorman. My buzzer stopped working. I filed a complaint with the city's Department of Housing Preservation and Development. I also began contacting other residents discreetly. Many were afraid to speak, but a few Mrs. Fuentes, Mr. Halverson from 5B, and a young couple from 2A were willing to meet. We formed a small tenant coalition and began documenting everything, every fine, every denied request, every intimidation tactic. Then I did what I do best. I started writing. Exposure. I published an article on a mid-tier investigative site titled The Westford, where the HOA runs a shadow government. It blew up. Emails flooded in. Tenants from other buildings wrote with similar stories. The City Council's Housing Committee reached out. Then a journalist from the New York Times contacted me. Dolores called me to the boardroom again. This time her charm was gone. You're destroying this community. No, I'm exposing it. 2 weeks later, the board sent cease and desist letters to the website, claiming defamation. But the damage was done. City inspectors arrived. Auditors began looking into the Westford's financials. And then the bombshell dropped. The developer deal. An anonymous tip landed in my inbox internal emails from Sinclair Holdings. They outlined a plan to acquire 70% of the units in the Westford and convert it into a luxury rental, bypassing co-op laws using an obscure legal loophole. Dolores was promised a condo in Tribeca and a board seat in Sinclair's parent company if she helped grease the path. I shared the documents with the Times. The front page headline 3 days later read, Board Games, How a Manhattan Co-op Nearly Became a Developer's Pawn. The city launched a formal investigation. The fallout. Dolores resigned from the board within a week. Victor left the building entirely. Sinclair Holdings withdrew its interest. The city enacted a new housing transparency rule requiring co-ops to disclose internal sales and board affiliations. The Westford elected a new board one that included me, Mrs. Fuentes, and the couple from 2A. We rewrote the handbook. We opened the meetings. We installed real oversight. A new chapter. Life didn't magically become perfect. The elevator still broke down sometimes. The heat clanked in winter. But there was peace. Mrs. Fuentes smiled more. Frank stopped looking over his shoulder. And I wrote a book. The co-op that tried to evict me for breathing hit the shelves the following spring. And yes, there's now a Netflix adaptation in the works. New York will always have its dark corners. But sometimes sunlight breaks through when one person decides to stop being afraid and starts asking questions. And for me, that story started with a potted plant on a windowsill. In a city built on power and prestige, the truth still finds a way to rise. Because sometimes one voice is all it takes to bring down a wall of silence. And for Lena Brooks, that voice started with a single potted plant and ended with a city awakened.